It's been almost a day since the NBA draft, the first round of the draft at least, and it was definitely one of the more entertaining drafts simply because you had no idea what was going to happen. We saw a lot of people who rose, but we also saw a lot of people who fell. I'm here with Cameron King and Jake Schrantz, and I'm Branden Blue. And I just want to ask you guys, what was your reaction to the first day of the draft?
It was a crazy day. It was the fireworks started a little later than I expected. I kind of expected some trades closer to the top, but once they got going, it was a lot. There was a decent amount of movement. It was pretty entertaining for a draft that everybody said was pretty weak. It was an entertaining night.
Yeah, I feel like exactly what we were kind of expecting. A little bit of chaos up top. Teams kind of took the guy that they thought was best on their board, whether or not that was what the experts thought. And it was pretty exciting to see where a lot of these prospects have gone because we've been covering them all year, breaking down what each of these teams up top should do. So it was definitely exciting to finally put it in ink what these teams are going to be doing in the future.
I think for me, the biggest surprise and probably the most fun thing that happened involves Rob Dillingham. At number 8, the Spurs had him, and they drafted him, and I thought that they were going to keep him. But then we got the tweet from Rose saying that, we got the tweet from Woj saying that they were trying to move him, and they weren't just trying to move him to some other bottom tier team, but they moved him to the Minnesota Timberwolves. And I think, for me personally, for Dillingham, I really like this because I feel like one, it hides a lot of his weaknesses, but it also puts him in a situation where he can be a key player going forward.
Yeah, I feel like this move with Dillingham to go into that backcourt with Anthony Edwards, one, I think if they give him the reins early on, I feel like you said, Brandon, it's going to hide a lot of his defensive liabilities early on in his career. But those are two very like quick, shifty, tough players to guard on ball with Dillingham and Anthony Edwards. We already know that Dillingham can shoot. He's probably the quickest player, the shiftiest guy in this entire draft. And if he ends up becoming one of these all-stars that we were wondering, where would it come from in this draft class that had a lot of question marks at the top? If it's Rob Dillingham, as 5 or 6 years down the line, we're looking back and saying that was that top player in the draft. If Minnesota got him for 2 picks a half a decade from now, that's going to be a major steal.
Yeah, I remember when the trade first got announced, and I remember people were scrambling like online trying to figure out like which player they traded because it just one I kind of forgot that with the new year coming around that they would have more picks to trade. So I was just like, I was working on the assumption they couldn't trade any picks, and I seen somebody say it was like Nas Reed, and then it was maybe Jaden McDaniels, which was like, I was like, hold up, that there's no way, like that wouldn't be a good deal for the Timberwolves. But when it got out that they only traded picks for the number 8 pick, I was like, okay, that was Tim Connie working again. Like he's the guy who orchestrated the Nuggets dynasty before they won the championship, and he seems to be on his way to something in Minnesota as well. Like that was, to me, I wouldn't say it's necessarily still of the draft just because that's probably where a lot of people had Dillingham around in their boards, but I think it's probably one of the better fits of the first round. Like he can go, and the only problem really with his game is his size and his defense, but you're putting him into the best defensive team in the league. So I think they're going to be able to hide him a little bit. And last year, especially in the playoffs against Dallas, I think we saw that if you really load up on Anthony Edwards and force the others to beat you, like they didn't really look capable to. Like they really struggled in that series with anybody else doing almost anything other than Anthony Edwards. Like he was seeing like almost 3 guys. Like he would see like one guy in front of him, another guy that would either double or be in like really hard help, and then another backline defender. So just Dillingham should be someone for them who can come in, take some of the pressure off Anthony Edwards in spot minutes. He'll be able to create his own shot. He's a really, really good catch and shoot 3-point shooter. He was in the 98th percentile of college last year, so I think it's really a perfect fit with Minnesota. The only thing is he will have to hold up defensively because that's kind of their it's their culture that they built there. And if he doesn't fit into that, I can see his minutes not being what he wants them to be early on.
Yeah, I agree for sure, Cameron. And I think that's kind of why I feel like Minnesota drafting him was probably best case scenario for him because not you mentioned the thing about teams being able to load up easily on Edwards, and even if he doesn't necessarily hit immediately, I still think that he could provide minutes in the playoffs, even if it's just for like 1-2 games. Just because I think there will be situations where they're gonna need kind of somebody to come in and give them an offensive boost, give them some quick buckets. I just think about Tyrese Maxey, his first year with the Sixers. Like, he was a rookie, but he came in and he still, during the playoffs, he was a much needed boost off of the bench. And I could see Dillingham having a similar role. But I like that you also brought up the question marks about his defense because Minnesota, obviously, they're probably the best perimeter defensive team in the NBA, arguably. But I still think they're going to expect a lot out of Dillingham on that other side of the ball. He doesn't have to be necessarily the best defender per se, but I think as long as he can, I think that they're also built that they can hide him so he's not getting attacked. Teams aren't just trying to go at him like he's a liability. But I think it's going to be important that he tries to at least become a great team defender, learn how to rotate well, because if he can't do that, then I think that will kind of squander his minutes.
Yeah, I almost feel like Dillingham as a rookie could have kind of a similar role as Bones Highland a few years back with the Denver Nuggets when he first came into the league, kind of just that spark plug off the bench, kind of leading that second unit. I know they've already got Nickeil Alexander-Walker, who did a pretty good job doing that this year, but I almost feel like if they can keep Mike Conley around, because he was obviously solid for them, but if they could bring Dillingham and Nickeil Alexander-Walker off the bench as their backup guard duo, I don't know how much that will be utilized in the playoffs, because how much do you really want to take Anthony Edwards and Mike Conley off the court in the playoffs? But definitely during the regular season, that's going to be a killer bench for them.
Yeah, I think it's also like some insurance for Conley because he's dealt with some injury issues over the last few years, and like in the playoffs, it allows you to stagger them and it allows you to give them each more rest than what they were allowed this year. As far as looking at this from a Spurs point of view, I really didn't understand it. I feel like they probably would have got more value out of the pick if they just kept Dillingham. They got a really late 20, I want to say a pick in the 2030s from Minnesota, and then they got a 29 pick swap when both teams should be good, and you would project Minnesota to be good in 2030. So I didn't really understand. I think there was probably more value out there for that pick. And I think Dillingham would have been just as good a fit with the Spurs, just because Dillingham's size is concerning on defense, but Wemby he covers in that sense. He provides a lot of rim protection and a little bit of switchability. So I think he could have covered him in that sense, and I think it would have been a really interesting fit with them two running pick and rolls and stuff like that. I think Dillingham was one of the better pick and roll guards in college last year, and I think with Wemby it would have been a really dangerous combo. But I know Stephon Castle wanted to play point guard, so maybe that's why they did it. But I don't know. Did you guys understand that trade at all?
I think for me, admittedly, I saw the two picks that they had gotten. I just kind of assumed that they were for next year. But then obviously you look and you see that they're way down the road, and I know you had mentioned it before, Cameron, but both of these teams, ideally they're still going to be winning teams in those situations. But I also, I don't get it from the sense that I feel like Dillingham, I like the pick with Castle, but I feel like Dillingham also kind of addressed another need that they had. And obviously Castle said that he wanted to be a lead guard, but in high school he showed that he kind of could be that guy, but at UConn he didn't really do that a whole lot. So I guess Castle did get his way in that they are going to try to put him in those positions. But I feel like it's not that I don't think Castle can do it, but I just feel like Dillingham already could kind of do that type of stuff. So to me, it's like, I don't know. I it is a little bit of a head scratcher for me, but I don't know how you feel about it, Jake.
Yeah, I feel like it did kind of shock me that, you know, guard was definitely San Antonio's biggest need coming into this draft. And initially, when we thought that they addressed it in back to back picks at 4 and 8, I was like, that's pretty aggressive, especially taking Stephon Castle and Rob Dillingham. At least their, top skill sets were a little bit different. Obviously, Castle more known for being physical on the defensive end with some potential upside on offense. And it's a bit different with Dillingham, right? He's fully an offensive player. You're not really drafting him with hopes of him ever becoming like an all defensive type guy in the point guard position. But I feel like the trade was definitely necessary, but I don't know if it was for 2 picks that are 12 years old right now. I feel like there must have been some more value out there than what they got back. And maybe they were just satisfied just getting some future picks because you never know. I mean, once the Spurs are competitive, those 2 picks in the 2030s could be the icing on a cake for maybe one more trade down the line that helps bring somebody, a final piece in at a trade deadline, for example, to help Wemby get that championship. So let's actually stick on San Antonio. Stephon Castle getting drafted 4th to them. He's potentially going to be the next guard for the future for the Spurs. And I feel like this is a great fit, a great guy that is going to continue this defensive-minded team mentality. But also, I feel like he's got a lot of upside to grow on the offensive end and kind of be that 1-2 punch with Wemby.
Yeah, I heard a comparison for him last night that I'm kind of mad I didn't think of. Like, to me, it was a really good one. Somebody said he has the potential to be like a bigger Drew Holiday. And like, that kind of put him as positioned him as a prospect in my mind, because it is a comparison I agree with. And I think if he could be that, I think he has the potential to be, bar none, like probably the best prospect in the draft, potentially. Like, if his shot ever really falls, like, he has all the athletic tools, he has the size, and we saw he could play within offense at UConn. And like, there's just like, honestly, I can see him being a player that's like really hard to take off the floor in the future. Like, he's gonna be one of the better defensive players, and if he can shoot, has everything you need on offense. I think he probably has more than what he showed at UConn last year. I think UConn kind of only needed him to do certain things with the team they had. Going back and watching his high school tape, like, he really had like an on-ball, like Sean Livingston-esque, like, dribble and mid-range game. And I think if he can bring some of that to the NBA level with the defense and like intensity he played with at UConn, I think he'll be one of the better picks in the draft.
I kind of agree with you, Cameron, because I feel like you just look at his size that he has, and I think on Twitter, one of the main things that I would always see is they would show his game against Ron Holland back in high school, where he had like, I want to say 40 or something points. And then I kind of went and looked at some of his high school footage myself, and I think it's definitely there. I would have liked to have Dillingham just because I think he has maybe a higher upside in that category, but I think with Castle, there's still a lot of room to work with. And where the Spurs at now, I think he'll have that freedom, which I think will be good for his individual development. And even if none of that doesn't hit, I still like what he brings on the other side of the ball. And I think when you have him, like, just looking at what he does defensively, the Spurs were one of the worst defensive teams in all of the NBA. So I think that adding him, he's the guy who's probably going to be the best point of attack type of defender in this draft. I think they addressed the need. I think they addressed the need very well.
And like, even if he doesn't become Drew Holiday, I feel like his floor is like the early portion of Marcus Smart. I don't know if he'll pull a Depoy in his career, but that's a player that had a ton of value for the Boston Celtics for a long time until he ended up moving this past year to the Memphis Grizzlies. So if he can become kind of Marcus Smart-esque on defense with some potential upside offensively, maybe if his shot improves, if he's able to post up some of these smaller guards, because he is 6'6", I believe like 215 or 220, so he's almost got like a Shai Gilgeous-Alexander kind of frame, and if he can put the offensive game together, that could be a really, really interesting player for San Antonio to work with. I'm excited to watch it play out.
It's funny you mentioned the Shai Gilgeous thing, though, because there was an interview where he compared himself to Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, and the main thing he was talking about was just playing with pace and being kind of a bigger guard. And if that is, I think that would be kind of fun if that is something that he can kind of turn into. I'm not saying he's going to be like Shai Gilgeous exactly, but if he's just even half of that offensively, then I think the sky's the limit for Castle. But I want to get kind of negative.
Okay.
Because there was a pick last night. And mind you, I really like this prospect. Like, I actually really like this prospect. But the fit is something I just can't get behind. And Cameron's shaking his head. I feel like he probably knows who I'm talking about. But Ron Holland going to Detroit. How do we feel about that?
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was shocked. One, because like kind of all the intel before the draft was that he had the potential to fall. So I was like, I was kind of expecting it, like just the way everyone was talking about it. But I just don't know what they're doing in Detroit. Actually, before we go any further, shout out to Jake, I believe. I want to say he is the only person I've ever seen actually mock this happening in our mock draft that we had. But I just don't know. I just don't know. Like, Cade Cunningham, he has to be fed up. Like, he has to be punching air somewhere. Like, he will have nowhere to drive for yet another year. Like, there's going to be nowhere to go. Every time he does a crossover, there's going to be a guy in help. Like, this is, I think I posted on Twitter last night, this is really the ultimate bet on the guy they just got from the Pelicans. They just got the Pelicans shooting coach who helped like Herb Jones and Trey Murphy kind of along with their jumpers. Like, if he can turn some of these guys like Asur Thompson, like Jaden Ivey, like Ron Holland, or Jalen Duren, or any of the non-shooters they have into like plausible shooting threats, then you won't find a more athletic team out there. So like in a way, like if you think he can do that, then maybe. But in the short term, at least, you're just kind of locking yourself into the top of the lottery again for the next few years, because like even if he is able to turn the jumpers around, it's gonna take a while. Like a jumper is just not something you get overnight. Like I think we've seen it with Herb Jones. Like he's a good 3-point shooter now, but it took him a few years to like get it, like to at least be consistent as it is now. So like, man, if I was Cade Cunningham's team, I would be furious. Like, to me, I think it's also like possibly an indication that they might not be as in on Cunningham as everyone thinks, with there being a new guy in the front office. Like maybe he's not building around Cunningham. Like maybe he's kind of starting fresh. Because like, I think if you could pick a team that shouldn't have drafted a non-shooter, I think the Pistons would have had that spot. So I don't know what they're doing.
You bring up the new shooting coach and the need for them to improve on some of the shooting on the perimeter, especially like Asar Thompson, Jaden Ivey, and obviously with Ron Holland, that's not his main skill. But I almost feel like people are freaking out because he himself can't shoot, and they're wondering if Ron Holland will develop a jumper. I almost feel like they might let him be the guy that they don't necessarily need to have a jump shot, because Asar Thompson's form is not broken in the slightest. Like he squares it up, his shoulders are square to the rim, and he started to take a few strides before the injury, and I feel like that would be the guy I would more focus on developing a jump shot, because he could become that nice kind of swingman 3-and-D player that is going to lock up the other team's best wing and then be a three-point shooter on the other end. I think Ivy's jumper also doesn't need much work, like in terms of form. So I think it's just more reps with him and more playing time specifically. So hopefully if it's James Borrego or some other coach that comes in, that will be kind of a focus. But Ron Holland, I think, is a decent fit, maybe even a good fit. I mean, Cade needs someone to go run with and throw lobs to. And if he's going to also defend, this is a Detroit team that I think is going to be taking a slight step forward with Ron Holland.
Now, I see what you're saying about Ivy. I kind of agree with that. But Thompson, I'm not sure he can I don't know if he's going to get that much better. And the only reason I say that is because there were games last year where when Monty was still the coach, there were games where he was just letting Thompson shoot, essentially, and he was playing him heavy minutes. And teams were just leaving him wide open, and he was airballing open threes. Like, just seeing those performances, I don't know if he's going to get that much better as a shooter. And I think I was kind of I know how you said you think Holland will be their guy that could be a non-shooter. I was kind of expecting that to be the role with Thompson. And now I think Holland could be better than Thompson is, but it's still just not ideal for me, especially if they want to keep Cunningham, which I personally think they should. I just feel like, I don't know. I just feel like you want spacing, especially in today's NBA. And I personally like Ron Holland. I was a lot higher on him than I think a lot of other people were. But I think this is just probably the worst scenario, just because it doesn't. Obviously, defense was one of their areas where they needed to improve. But I think when you have offense as well, that makes defense a little bit easier, if that makes sense. Maybe I'm just talking out of my, but I don't know. We'll see how it works out. We don't even know who they're going to hire yet, but it's just something I'm not too keen about.
Yeah, with kind of build on what you just said, offense is it makes defense a little easier because you're making the other team's stars work on the other end. If I think you're gonna see because I do get that they don't have to start them all, they don't have to play all the non-shooters at once, but the non-shooters kind of are the best players. So you're gonna at least see, I would say, 2 or 3 of them probably start together. So I don't see what's out there to stop teams from going zone. If I was an opposing team seeing the Pistons, I would definitely go zone. And if you allow the other team to sit in zone, they have all the energy in the world to come back at you on the offensive end, and you can't make them pay on the other end. That's how you get blown out. And I don't know. I don't feel today we just seen a team win with 5 out. We just saw the Celtics won the NBA championship going 5 out. The year before that, the Nuggets won with only one non-shooter on the floor with Aaron Gordon, one non-shooter. I like Jaden Ivey's shot potential. I think eventually he'll be able to make shots. I think Asor is probably years away from being a consistent 3-point shooter, 2 to 3 years. Ron Holland's probably 2 to 3 years away. And in a way, you kind of just drafted a less defensive focused Asar Thompson with Ron Holland. He's a little less athletic. He's a little shorter, if I'm not mistaken. He's not as good on defense, but I think he's better on offense, creating his own shot inside the paint. But it's almost like they're the exact opposite of what the Celtics just rolled out there. The Celtics are 5 out. This team is 5 in. Everybody is. I just think especially at 5, if you wanted Holland, I feel you could have traded back. And I get what you're saying. Yeah, he'll be another player to run with him, but they kind of already had that. They have Asor Thompson, they have Jalen Duren, they have Jaden Ivey. They have all the athleticism they kind of needed. I would have liked to personally see them go someone who can space the floor at least a little bit for the guys who are attacking the paint, because now it's we kind of know where all these guys like to get to. Even Cade Cunningham, he can shoot the 3, but he's more so a person who wants to play closer to the rim. He's like, that's his advantage as a really big point guard. Like, he wants to get downhill and get to the rim. You just drafted another person who's going to be in his way. Like, him, Duren, like, if they ever put that lineup on the court together of, like, all their best players, like, you might see the first, like, 5 inside the paint zone. Like, no one outside the 3-point line, outside the free throw line. Like, I don't know. I don't understand it.
I just feel like I've seen enough interviews and stuff from not even just Asar Thompson, but both the Thompson twins. They have such a growth mindset, and they just seem super coachable. So I don't know. I feel like you guys are kind of sleeping on the potential of quicker development than anticipated for Asar Thompson over one offseason, because he was just a rookie, obviously. So, we've seen guys improve their jumper. I feel like it's a better chance of his jumper improving because he has that coachable trait rather than a guy that is, going to take some advice in one year, out the other. So if Asar Thompson becomes a guy that can shoot, if Jaden Ivey gets more playing time and becomes, a solid number 2 scorer behind Cade Cunningham, I don't see why Ron Holland couldn't work if the development in Detroit does what they're supposed to do.
I hear what you're saying. Like, don't get me wrong. I really like I like all the individual pieces. Like, I really like each player. Like, I was a huge Jaden Ivey fan coming out. I really like the Asar Thompson. I like Ron Holland. I just don't think they go well together, just because, like, while you're right, I expect Asar Thompson to be better, but, like, how I'll ask you this. Even with the new shooting coach, how many years would you say it'll be? Like, how long will it be until he cracks even, let's say, 33%, so making 1 out of every 3 threes? How long do you think it is before he cracks that number?
I don't think it'll be too long. I think maybe 1 or 2 seasons as he gets more comfortable in the NBA, figures out a little bit more of the spacing now that teams are. He's going into this upcoming season knowing that teams are going to leave him open, so that I'm sure this entire offseason he's been working on catch and shoot shots in the corner, on the wings. So no doubt that was probably the biggest thing they gave him in terms of stuff to work on this offseason. So I don't see why he wouldn't already be taking those next steps in this upcoming year. I don't know how quickly in one offseason the percentages will jump, but I know that it will eventually come. It's just a matter of how long, like you said.
Yeah, see, I kind of agree. I think it's closer to 2 than it is to 1, but the thing is like, if you're Cade Cunningham, like, we've been bad my entire career, like, really bad. And y'all just drafted another player who will probably have to wait another 2 to 3 years before he can get out of my way. And I just think you just didn't do your best player any favors here. What do you think, Brandon? How long do you think before these Piston players, like, are consistent average shooters in the league, like, or slightly below average, like, consistently at least serviceable shooters?
To me, now I'm a Sixers fan, so obviously I was around during the Ben Simmons era, and it was like, oh, he'll be able to become a jump shooter if he just starts taking them. And even Brett Brown came out and lied in press conferences and was like, yeah, we're making him take 1 3 a game. That didn't happen. But
the thing is, though, did Ben Simmons ever seem to have that, like, coachable trait? Like, we've all seen the footage of him at practice, just he doesn't care. He never works
true.
on it, it doesn't seem like.
That is true. But even then, like, a guy like Asar Thompson, this year he shot 18% from 3. And I'm not saying it's not going to go up, but I'm just like, how much is it going to go up, And I think that's been a question about both him and his brother. And I'm not saying that they're not going to develop, but it's just shooting is probably one of the hardest skill sets to develop, because especially when you get to the NBA, it's not just about getting the shot off. It's about getting the shot off over taller players. And you have less time to, they're rotating fast on defense. So you have to be able to get the shot off quickly too. And they might leave Asar open, but even still, it's like some of those games I saw last year, it just, I don't know. I'm just not completely sold on it. And again, I'm a player. I'm like Cam. I genuinely think that a lot of the Pistons' individual players, and even though they had a really bad last season, I think that individually their players are good. It's just the way that they're constructed, and honestly, last year the way that they were coached, and it didn't seem like they had a lot of direction. It feels like we're kind of getting that same energy, especially with how they drafted Holland. And I don't know, maybe they have some more moves that they want to make, but it's still just kind of a head scratcher for me. And I think it's just hard to also develop shooting too when you have so many other non-spacers on the floor, in my opinion. So I don't know.
I was just gonna say, like, kind of go on what you just said. Like, Ben Simmons is interesting to me, like, as a case study for like Ron Holland or Short Thompson, because like they obviously wanted him to develop a shot, but like I kind of understand from like his point of view is like, I'm 6'10", I'm more athletic than everybody. Like, I'm kind of bailing the defense out if I'm sitting there shooting threes. Like, in a way, he was just way more efficient going to the rim and playmaking for other players. So like, you kind of, in the heat of trying to win games, you kind of just never go into it. So like, in a way, with guys like a Short Thompson and Ron Holland, like, they have always been like the most athletic guys on the court. So it's like, shooting, like, are we sure that they're even going to take enough to get better when you have, like, if they are trying to win games next year, like, the two guys, like, the best way to do that would be for both of those guys to go to the rim. And I think every possession they go to the rim is another possession where they're kind of sacrificing that development in a way.